On my previous video, I showed you how you can download and install VMware ESXi version 8. In this demonstration, I'm going to show you some basic navigation options and other configuration options available to you in this particular hypervisor. First thing you need to do is to log into your web GUI. You need to find your IP address for the server, which will be displayed on the server main page. So on here, for example, you will have this IP address for your web GUI. So for me, it will be 192.168.26.10. And then open up a web browser and enter that IP address to get it to the login screen. Once you're on the login screen, use the root user to log in, which you created during the installation process. If you don't remember the root user and what you created, you can watch my previous video on how you can install the VMware ESXi Hypervisor version 8, and that will help you with navigating through the installation process. So during the installation process, you should have created the root user, and that's what we're going to use to log in. So I'm going to enter my password for my root user, and once you log in, you will get a message saying welcome to whatever the host name that you have. So for me, it's going to be welcome to localhost.local domain. And this would be your main page of your web GUI. And the reason why I have this dark mode is because I went into the help section, and under the about, I changed the theme preference to the dark mode. I have already posted a video on how you can change the configurations for the web UI themes on my YouTube channel, so you can go and check it out. So I will not go over that today, but the reason why I have dark mode is because I went into the about section and I changed the UI preference to the dark mode. Now, as a new user to ESXi, what important here is to understand how you can navigate through different configuration options so that you can get the best out of this particular hypervisor. VMware ESXi is a type 1 hypervisor. In other words, it is known as also a bare metal hypervisor that get installed onto the hardware that you have, and then you can install virtual machines within this hypervisor that can be deployed to different environments, whether it's your home lab or school projects or in a production environment. Compare this with the type 2 hypervisor, such as the VMware Workstation, this one, that will get installed on top of an operating system. So what that means is basically you have a Windows machine like this one, and then on that Windows machine, we have the VMware VMware Workstation Pro install, and that is a type 2 hypervisor, and on top of that you can install virtual machines. But VMware ESXi is not something like that. Instead, it is a type 1 hypervisor that get installed onto the bare metal hardware. So that's what make it a type 1 hypervisor. So in other words, there are no operating systems behind this ESXi host. Now, you may ask then, Sanuja, why do you have ESXi installed on this type 2 hypervisor then? This is because this is a laboratory environment. I'm just trying to show you how the installation process and configuration works. But if you were to install ESXi in a production environment, you would not install VMware ESXi on top of the VMware Workstation. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. You will be installing VMware ESXi on a bare metal server. So having said that, let's look at some navigation options. So on the main page, we have the vCenter server. If you are installing this for your home use, or whether or you are using it for a laboratory environment, or whether you're installing it for study purposes, you probably don't have the vCenter server. vCenter server is a pro upgrade, and the evaluation copy after, I believe, 60 days, it's going to expire that vCenter server. But if you're interested in vCenter server, you can click on it and it'll get you to the VMware Customer Connect page, and you can log in and install those options if you are in a production environment. So that's what you have at the very top. Then you have the option to create register virtual machines. This is where you go in and select these options on this pop-up menu to create a virtual machine. So for example, if I want to deploy a Ubuntu virtual machine, I can go for example, say create a virtual machine and go next, and I can select the virtual machine name. So let's say this is a Linux virtual machine, and then I can select these options and go through the installation process of installing a new virtual machine. So this is basically how you can create and install a new guest operating system or virtual machine within the ESXi host. I have already posted a video on how to do this, so I'm going to cancel this right now. If you're interested in going through this again in the version 8, I can do that as well. But for ESXi version 7.0 or something 7, I have already posted on my YouTube channel how to navigate through this. But this is where you go to do that even in ESXi version 8. So as you can see, the version 7 and version 8 are very similar. You basically go to the main page and you can go create right here, and you can go through the prompts. Next option is the shutdown option. So there you have an option to shut down, and it will give you a warning that shutting down the ESXi host may create some problems for your virtual machines. So make sure that everything is good to go before you go shut down. And you have the reboot option. Again, you get a warning here, and you have the option to refresh. That will refresh all the data in here. And then we have finally the option called actions. So the actions will have a couple of options, such as all of these options right here listed, as well as some other options such as the services, lockdown mode, etc., permissions, SSH, so on and so forth. Now, I'm not going to go into depth of any of these options in this video, because I want to keep this video very short and sweet for those of you who are new to ESXi. So just remember, these options can create certain features, navigate, change certain options as a system administrator at the advanced level as well. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to go through anything deep in here for now. On the main page, you can also see your CPU information. So in here we have 8 core CPU, and this is my CPU information listed here. It shows how much the flash is available. Virtual flash is available. That is how much memory we have. We have networking options. So I have 2 network cards. And it is listed here. We have DNS option, and we have the network configuration options, as well as the storage options shown here on this screen. On the right hand side, we have options related to the virtual machine environment, such as the configuration options for ESXi and vMotion options, and also date and time associated with it. Now, on the top right hand corner, you have the CPU usage, and the memory usage and the storage usage, which I use a lot when I'm using it in laboratory or production environment, to quickly glance at how much it being used at the time. So currently, for example, I have 8 GB of memory allocated to this ESXi host machine, and out of that we have 6.31 GB available. And if I refresh this page, going refresh, this data may get refreshed accordingly. This is a very useful at a glance data that I use, along with the performance summary shown here for the last hour, and that will be very helpful to you. On the top right hand corner, you also have a search option where you can search certain items, and it is an immediate display of data going to be shows up. Like what I mean by that is, you don't have to search and press enter. It will give you a list of information. For example, if I type virtual, and that it shows no information. If I type VM, let's see if VM brings any information. Here you go. So I just simply type VM in here, and anything associated with VM is shown up here. So you don't even need to press enter. You can just go VM and it'll, you know, display whatever the information you have, and then you can click on these things and then you can go and check all those options there. So going back to the host page, before we move away from this host page, I also want to show up at the top. You have that root user, that's the user that you are logged in, and you have options in here where, you know, how often this page should be refreshed. You can put to 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or turn off. And you have the option to change your password here. So if you're interested in changing your password, and you have other settings options such as you have enable visual effects. You can send statistics data to the VMware if they want, if you would like to help them with that. You can change your language preference. You can change some console information, such as, for example, you can change the keyboard layout, default console, etc., etc. So you have that information. Also, you have the logout here. Under help, the about section have some information about your virtual machine. You also have the option to change your theme. For example, you can change your light theme, dark theme, etc., etc., which I have went over in my previous video. And under help section, you also have the option to update. So this is a useful tool. You can use proxy servers as well. You can go through this update process, and I will go through that on a separate video, but just know that's where the update is located. And you also have the option to go into the VMware website. So click on it. It just opened the vmware.com website. And also at the very end, you also have the tools and links. So you have the documentation information, command line tools, etc., etc. So if you click on it, it'll get you to the developer site, and it'll have some information that you can use to navigate and do things with this particular machine. Now, moving on from this, on the left hand pane, you have few navigation options. So the next one is the manage navigation pane and navigation option. And if you click on that link, you will have a bunch of tabs that you can navigate through, which are hardware, licensing, system, packages, services, security, and users, etc. Now under system, you have some advanced options here, which I will not go through today. I will do a separate video on advanced configuration options in here. For a novice user, like a beginner user or a student user, you don't need to update many of these things options unless your instructor or you know, somebody tell you to update it. Just leave this alone. Editing these advanced settings may actually break your ESXi host, so be careful with what you do with this. The next item under the system is the auto start. By default, auto start you know, have this particular configuration, but you do have the ability to edit those options. So if I click edit up here, you can set the auto start enable. What that's going to do is, if the system somehow power off or rebooted or something happened, as during the reboot process the system suddenly power off, for example, or the power goes out and power comes back up, this auto restart will enable you to, you know, auto restart the entire server. So that's where you can do that. So you can do that with here. And one of the nice features in here that I can show you is the wait for heartbeat. If I press yes in here, what that's going to do is it's going to wait and look to see if the ESXi host and virtual machines are on before you start rebooting and auto restarting stuff. So this is a really nice option. And you can set the delay, how long, how many seconds. The delay is typically set to 120 seconds. And by default, this option is in off. So if I go in here, like if I press cancel, you can see it is not enabled. You can enable it again. It's your call, you know, how you're going to enable it. And you can actually set this to different values to each virtual machine once you have a bunch of virtual machines installed. So currently this is a fresh install. I don't have any virtual machines in here, so that's why I don't have anything listed under here virtual machines. But if you do, you can actually change these configuration options for auto restart of each virtual machine different from each other. This is important in certain configurations. For example, if you have a Active Directory domain controller, in other words a domain controller on a virtual machine, in other words you have a Windows server, and then you have a bunch of other virtual machines that is connected to that domain controller, you better have that domain controller up and running before those other virtual machines connecting to that domain controller get boot up. So for example, if I have a Windows Server 2022 installed here as a virtual machine, then I have Windows 10 machine, Windows 11 machine, and Ubuntu machine, and they are all connected to the Windows Server 2022 for DHCP, DNS, as well as a domain. Then I need to make sure that the Windows Server 2022 virtual machine boots up first. Then those other Windows 10, Windows 11, and the Ubuntu machine get kick in, and because that way they can connect to the domain and obtain DHCP and DNS. If for some reason the Windows 10 machine get boot up and they don't see the Windows Server 2022 because the virtual machine is not boot up yet, then it will fail IP assignment. In other words, it won't get a DHCP IP address because they don't see that virtual machine being boot up, and it will result in basically not connecting to the domain. So you may have to reboot the Windows 10 machine in that situation in order to obtain that information. So that's why we set these things up when you have multiple machines, to make sure that things like domain controllers get boot up and go live before any other client virtual machines get booted up in here. So again, I will go through this in depth on a separate video. Just know where it is. So for now, it's under Manage on the left hand pane under System, Auto Start, and that's where you can find that. And Swap is basically where you see all the storage information related to Swap, and it has some configuration options here. You can enable it's enabled by default, and you can change the data store options here. So data store 1 is the default hard drive space associated with all ESXi version 8 and version 7, for example, machines. So that's where the data store 1 is come from. I didn't create data store 1. In other words, it's a default one that comes with it, and you can enable the swap options associated with that. Then we have the date and time. So right now it's showing date and time here as 1709 UTC on October 23rd, 2022. Obviously my time, you can see down here, is 11:09 AM, and here it's showing as 17:09. That because of the the time configuration in here is associated with a different area than where I am, and you can edit that options. For example, you can go to edit NTP settings, and in here you can manually configure the date and time if you're interested in that. You can also use the NTP servers, and you can create the date and time using that as well. So if you want to do manually, you can select the manual options here, and you can click in here, and if you click on that, and you can change date and time down here. So for example, right now the time is 11:10 AM, and I can use that, and you can save it, and that would change that value to 11:10 if we actually change that to 11:10 11:10 and save, and that should change that time to that particular one. So right here, like it shows the update date and time is there. You can also edit the NTP settings here. Again, you can you can enable it, you can disable it. Those options are there. You can refresh this page, and then there are some actions associated here as well. So that's where the date and time comes. So if you want to change the date and time, as soon as you install your server, you basically end up here at the beginning. You go to the Manage, under the System menu, click on date and time, and that's where you do it. Next tab is the Hardware tab. So if I click on it, it has the power management options, and you can change the power management policies. currently I have it under balance. I can put it into high performance, or you can create a custom one. If you select the custom and click OK, it'll give you some custom power management options and policies you can update. You can click on it and you can click edit policy, and you can click each one of them, whether you want to have it balance or something else. You can put different values, and you can do a lot with it. So it's highly customizable. Again, these are a little bit of more advanced features that I'm not going to go through. I'm just going to show you, you have these options available, and I will go through separate videos on ESXi virtual machines and ESXi host client power configurations on a separate video. Just know where it is. So that's what we are doing in this video. The next option is called the licensing. So currently I have an evaluation copy. So this is my evaluation key. There is no key basically for VMware ESXi version 8. If you have ESXi version 7, you will have a evaluation key. You have to download from the customer website from from VMware. So you go to the VMware Customer Connect website and you will enter your key. But with ESXi 8, so ESXi 7 will have your evaluation copy key, but with ESXi 8 there are no keys. So you don't have a unique key for trial versions. Instead, you just simply download the ISO file, as I mentioned in my previous video, and then you will basically install it, and you will get, I believe, 60 days or something like that to use it. So right now, my expiration date is set to Thursday, December 22nd, 2022, which is, I believe, 60 days or something like that. And some of these options that are available to me will disappear as a result. You can still use in the home environment. Most of the features that you have available to you for free is good enough for home environment. But as I mentioned, if you are using in a production environment, you may want to consider buying a key at that point. In here, you also have the option to assign license keys. So if you purchase a license key, you can click on that and you can enter your license key in here to enable this from evaluation version to pro version. And again, we have the actions button here that just have the same information as in here. Sometimes these action buttons, like for example, if I go back in here in this action button, there are no options in here. I forgot to mention that. But sometimes in here, for example, in action, you have the option to select assign license key and etc, etc. You can have multiple license keys entered in here. That's why the action key shows that one key here, but you can have multiple keys here, and you can pick between them and select between them once you have that. So that's why you have under licensing. Under packages, which is the next tab under the manage options, you have multiple packages you can enable or disable. This is where sometimes I enable and disable, like for SSL access, for example. Typically, for example, SSL access is terminated, like a telnet, for example, definitely should be terminated in here somewhere in the packages. There may be some packages associated with telnet and SSL. So you can install, packages. You have the option to refresh packages. You have the option to also install and updates associated with these packages. And under services, this is where you enable and disable telnet, SSH, etc. Options that may be associated with some of the packages in here. By default, there are certain packages already installed here. But with the core programs, some of the services are already here, such as this. I believe telnet and SSH is a core software that you can actually enable it. So if you look at it, like for example, right here, the SSH is currently stopped. And if you want to enable SSH, you can select the SSH option in here and you can click start here, or you can right click on that SSH and you can click start here. So you have that option. So you can click here start. So right here it will give you a message saying SSH is now running. And right now I will have SSH access to this server because I have SSH enabled here. So you can enable shell, for example. You can right click start here. If you don't want to click on up here, and it'll give you a message up here. You can stop that message, like you can remove that message by pressing that button, and you'll get a confirmation down here. So down here it'll tell you what you have been done. So I don't need SSH. If you are not using SSH, I recommend that disable it. By default it is disabled, and shell is also disabled. For security reasons, we recommend that you keep any of the services that you don't need disable, and only enable the services that you actually use. By default, some of these services are needed for you to run even the basic task in here, so don't play around here if you don't know what you're doing. But if you decided to enable a default stop service, like put back into running, like for example this SSH, make sure that if you're not using that service, for example SSH to access this server, disable it, because that is a good security practice. So that's why you should do that. So I'm going to just simply disable it, and you can refresh it and you can see any new services popping up here. Then this action menu is not there, so it's because there's nothing to show in here. And then finally we have the security and users, and there are a bunch of options in security and users under that tab. The first one is the acceptance level. This is where basically you can issue under edit settings whether you're going to allow anybody to access this server, or we're going to do VMware certified, VMware accepted, or community. So you can select those options. What these options are and what they mean, I will go through on a separate video, but that's where you can change that option. Authentication, you have the option to join a domain. So if you want to connect this entire ESXi hypervisor to a domain, you can do that here. So if you have an outside domain, it's such as Windows Server 2022 installed on a completely separate server, or you have a company domain that you need to connect to, and this is where you're going to do it. So you go under manage security and users, under authentication, join domain, and you enter your domain credentials. You can also use the proxy as well right here. And then you can join the domain in here. So if you have a domain, if you press OK, it'll start joining. Currently I don't have it, so that's where you do it. And if you have already a domain connected but it's not showing up here, you can press the refresh button, it might show up here. Certificates, this is where you have the SSL certificate. So currently I do have a SSL certificate here, but it is digitally signed by itself, so there are no verification here. So that's why it says the certification is not valid here. So that's the certification detail, because it's a self-signed certificate with the 256 fingerprint self-sign to this particular machine. So as a result, obviously you're going to get an error message like that. Now if you have certificates that are valid that you want to import, or even a self-signed certificate you want to import, you can do it through here. So under security and users, under certificate, you click on import new certificate, and you can generate IP sign-in security request, or you can do FQDN certificate, and you can enter the certificate in here and press enter that certificate in this area as well. Again, I will go through these advanced configuration options on a separate video. I'm just going through the basic navigation here. Under users, you can see that we have the root user here, which is the user that we created during the installation process of the ESXi ESXi hypervisor. But you also can add users. So by clicking right here, add user, you can create a user, give it a description, use password, enter the passwords for them, and you can enable shell access if you want to enable shell access. For example, if I want to create a user called Sanuja, I can simply create Sanuja. This is a test user, and I'm gonna enter a password. And then I'm going to give them a shell access, and I'm going to say add, and that's simply going to add a test user right here. And you can edit, once you have the user information, you can edit the information in here. You can also edit the root user information here as well. So you can click on it and it says administrator, and then you can change the password and username. So you can see that when I click on the new user that I have created, I have the option to remove that user. See, if I can clearly remove, and it's, are you sure you want to remove the Sanuja? I can say yes, and it will remove. But if I click on the root, it does not have the option to remove user. That is because VMware ESXi is a Linux or Unix based system, and you cannot remove the root user. So make sure if you are in a production environment, you have a really strong password. So I'm in a lab environment, so I don't really care. So that some hacker can get into the system, because everybody gonna have that root user on the ESXi hypervisor. Then we have the roles. This is where we're gonna delegate whether a user gonna have an administrative role, anonymous role, no access role, etc., etc. And you can add roles as well. So if you click on add roles, there's a whole bunch of options that here you can go from root to system, trusted admin, global, fold access, schedule task, etc., etc. Again, I will go through this in depth in a separate video. You can add roles if you want to create a role as well in here, but for now, no, that exists. There's a lockdown mode in here as well that allow you to edit settings to change how the lockdown configurations work. So currently lockdown is disabled, so the lockdown mode is disabled. You can do strict lockdown and normal lockdown, and the description shows what that actually means, and that options are available here. So this is a good window for all your security. Next, we have the monitor options in here. So on the monitor options, on the left hand pane, I'm going to go to monitor, and I'm going to go into the tab called performance. So the notification is the one that we were there before, and there's no notification right now. So I'm just going to show you the performance. This gives you an overall view of your server performance. So right now this is CPU performance. I can check the memory performance. I can check the network performance. So this shows how the network is doing right now, and we can show you the disk performance. These are useful tools, and with a lot of information. Like for example, in the disk performance, I have the disk usage, disk read rate, write rate, maximum latency, a whole bunch of other information in here. And this can be a quick glance data that you can use to monitor the health of your hardware. So that's very useful tool, and you can navigate through and spend some time in here looking at things. And you can go to last hour, and because I only have just last hour, because right here it shows the reason why the only last hour, because this machine has not yet been running for a long time. I just booted up the machine, that's why it's only have the last hour. So again, you can flip through this and get some information. You can also select different virtual machines to monitor in here. Right now I don't have any virtual machines installed here, that's why there's nothing, but you can do that. Under hardware tab, you will have options available here as well. There's a warning message here: this system has no IPMI capabilities. You may need to install the driver to enable data to be retrieved. So you will get any warning message and stuff like that up here as well. You'll have some sensor information if you have any sensors available on this hardware. Again, I will show you this in a different video, but just know where they exist. And again, same goes for the storage. Under events, what's going to show you is it's going to show you all the events that you had. So you can navigate through those events. You can change this value to 10 or 100, and it shows 100 items. And in here, if you click on here, you can actually pull down like that, so you can view all the events. Again, this is good for security checks, as well as for checking the performance of your server. And if you have been running this server for a long time, you can go refresh, and that will refresh your page, and there will be maybe multiple pages you can navigate through depending on how many events are displayed at one time, as well as how long the server has been running. Under task, it shows all the tasks that are currently running. It's just like a task manager for the entire machine, and it shows all the things that happened in the past few days, weeks, etc., etc. Logs will give you some log data. You can navigate through, and then finally the notification, which I showed at the beginning. There was no notification at the beginning, right? Next, we have the virtual machines. This is where all virtual machines that you have created going to show up. You can create a new virtual machine right here as well by clicking here. Notice this pop-up window is the same as under the host create virtual machine, create/register virtual machine. So it's the same thing. It's another place to get there. In fact, you can right click here and create virtual machine here as well. I believe you can do that in here as well. Right click, create virtual machine. So you have multiple ways to do the same task. So by just familiarizing with this, if you have any exams or quizzes coming up, lab demonstration exams, this is just know where these things exist. So you can right click, so you can do multiple ways. So if I go like, virtual machine, right click, create virtual machine is the same thing. You can go through the installation process of a virtual machine here. And again, you will have all of these options turned on once you have that the virtual machine has been created. So nothing much to show in a brand new installation here. So I'm going to move on to the storage option. So on the left hand pane, I'm going to click on storage, and the default storage is now showing up, which is the data store 1 or data store 1. And it shows that we have the capacity, how much provisioned free space, the type of the drive, which is VMFS6, and the thin provisioning is allowed in here, so it's supported, and it is have a single access. And if I click on that data store, and it will give you more additional information address associated with that, and you can browse the data store up here as well. So again, you see that register VM here. You can click on that. What that's going to do, actually, if you have a virtual machine in this data store located in somewhere, you can register that in here so that you can pre-created virtual machine can bring into this data store. That's how you do it right here. And you can browse data store. So you basically browsing through folder structure in here. You can have the ability to increase capacity if you have enough hard drive space that you in here that you did not initially allocate. So if you have a hard drive where you install your VMware ESXi, but you only partitioned part of that hard drive, you have the ability to increase that hard drive space if you decided to choose to do so. So that's where that options come in. Again, I will go through an in-depth analysis of this later. So in the action menu, you have bunch of options here in addition to the options shown here. Increase capacity option, for example, you can rename. So if you don't like the default name data store 1, you have the ability to rename whatever you like in here, and then you have the ability to delete, unmount, etc. So, and also you have the option to permissions here too. That way you can, if you have multiple users, you can add users, and you can control who has access to this particular data store 1 hard drive space. Then you have the option to monitor your data store. So right now this is my data store, and you can monitor that information in here. And you have more storage options down here, but it is, if you click on it, you can see that it is the same as what we've seen here as well. So that's the storage side of things. And next we're going to go into the networking side of things. So under networking options here, the menu here on the left hand side, we have a bunch of tabs at the top. At the main networking options, we have the port groups, virtual switches, physical NICs, a virtual one, and TCP IP stack, and the firewall rules. So on the port groups, it shows the port groups available to you. So we have 2 in here, VM network. If I click on it, so that's what I have. So it shows that port group. If I go back in here on the networking, we have the management network. If I click on that, and it shows how the management network is done. And on here, we can have the ability to edit that information. We can click on the actual network card, network port, and then we can edit some options in here under edit settings. We have the DSCP static IP addresses, IPv4 only, management network. Right now in here we have the ability to replicate, etc. These are like advanced features. Again, I'm not going to go through this right now, but no, this is where the port group exists. Then we have the virtual switches. I have 1 virtual switches, that's this one. Again, when I click on it, I have some options available. You can edit settings, you can add uplinks, and we have a bunch of options here. Again, I'm going to go in depth of each one of these configurations on my future YouTube videos. So make sure to you thumbs up this video and subscribe to my channel, so that way more people are going to watch this video and you can enjoy my future videos on advanced configurations options associated with virtual switches, port groups, etc. Then we have the physical network interface. So I have two physical network interface cards. So that's these guys. And again, you can actually edit some of these options in here. So you have the ability to, edit all of these options. And then we have VM kernel, NICs. Again, I will go into depth of this later. And then we have the TCP IP stack options, which also can be updated. For example, we have default TCP IP stack. If I click on it, edit settings, I can change a whole bunch of things in here by selecting different options. And you can do manually. Like if you go manual, I can change the IP address, DNS proxy, domains information, etc., etc. So that's where the firewall rules are very important to securing your ESXi host machine, which is the hypervisor, and there are default firewall rules set here. I would not touch this unless you want to change some specific configuration. But what really important here is that if you're running a server that is outward facing, let's say you're running a web server or a mail server or a FTP server, this is where you can add edit information to allow access to certain things and make sure you keep those data secure. So if I click on one of these things, for example, CIM a secure server, which is stopped right now, I have the ability to go to edit settings and I can change certain firewall rules associated with it. Under actions, I can enable it and disable certain features. I can start this, like for example, if I press start here, it's going to start that, and it will start that server. If I want to stop that, I can go stop, and that will stop that particular feature firewall server. So as you can see, the SSS server and a whole bunch of stuff in here you can configure for your security need. So I went through all of this now. That I believe is the end of that section of the networking. Then the other section is this one, which is the VM network, which I briefly touched. You have some monitoring options in here as well. Just like the previous monitoring option, there's nothing much to say in here. If you're a novice user, just monitoring some options, and if you click on more networking options, you just get into the firewall. So like I said, there's multiple ways to navigate this, which make it so much easier for everybody. Like you can right click on here, you can go networking, you can right click, go to port groups, and you can basically add the port groups and stuff like that. You can right click on management network, you can edit settings on the management network. So there's multiple ways to navigate. So VMware have been in this business for long enough to make it easier to navigate and easier to manage for system administrators, these kind of environments. So it's pretty simple. I just want you to know these features exist and how to navigate for now. And because in the future I will be giving you some more hands-on data and information on what you can do with this data. For example, you can pull all of this data to a SQL database or MySQL database. You can remotely access some of this information. You can even navigate through certain functions and features and do some advanced configuration. But for now, that's it for today. And now you know how to navigate through ESXi version 8, vSphere version 8, web GUI consoles. Until next time, please make sure to thumbs up this video and subscribe to my channel, and have a nice day.